This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Parisi!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. And welcome into episode number 83 here on the Huskies Warming House Podcast. Noah Grant joining you on this Sunday morning alongside my co-host Nick Maxon, who took in the Huskies hockey game last night as well. We're going to obviously break that one down. A little bit of women's hockey. It was actually a split for both teams this weekend on the Huskies hockey side. And then we're going to discuss a little bit of Minnesota Wild hockey as well. Bless you, Mr. Nick.
Oh my goodness. Of course I have to wait till you start talking this. It's unbelievable.
There are some moments when we do this podcast that they happen and I go, do I take that out or not? I think that one's going to stay. I really do.
It's a natural thing. So
I have no words, and I also have no words about last night's game as well too. But of course we're going to get into that one. Don't worry. We're going to get into that one. But why don't we start it off with a sneeze list, Nick Maxon, starting us off for the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
The Center Ice View Weekly Roundup, and if it's not a sneeze, apparently it's a voice crack here early here on this Sunday morning. It's just my body just can't seem to get it together here.
We talked about this moments ago. I think we just imagined Caleb Peabody writing notes furiously here. There's another.
I don't think
one.
He's got to write notes. I think he's already writing my
obituary
here. Yeah, pretty much. So, but we're going to start obviously with the college hockey scene here. The split earned by St. Cloud State at the home and home series got the win on Friday 2-1 against the Gophers, and then kind of a controversial 4-3 overtime win for the Gophers back at the Herbert National Hockey Center. Again, that game being played on homecoming night there up in St. Cloud. I think we're probably going to do a little bit more of a deep dive on that a little bit later in the show. So we'll keep it just at that surface level for now. Next weekend, we'll welcome in the Wisconsin Badgers for the first time since 2013. Again, this non-conference schedule, we talked about it a lot. Now, a lot of these old, very close rivals come in on the schedule, and I really do hope, because again, St. Cloud number 2, Gophers number 4, Wisconsin not quite up there as far as a team in the rankings, but this schedule has to stay. It just has to. It's created a lot of early excitement and a couple of top 5 matchups in back-to-back weekends for the Huskies. So I think it's good for the game of hockey. It's good for fans and just good for the players too. Yeah. Let's go over to the women's side. Actually, I say again because I can't also read it this morning.
Yeah,
Can we just start from scratch?
You were just feeling it this morning.
It was a long day yesterday.
Hey, what is in that orange juice this morning? That's my question. Is a little bit of pick me up.
What isn't in the orange juice? Maybe that's the better question. There's no pulp. That's the good thing. I don't like pulp in my orange juice.
Well, I think that checks out because I'm a big pulp guy. So
okay.
I think that definitely checks out. Mason Solquist had a great weekend. We're going to just touch on the men's hockey thing as well too. And it really was a great weekend of hockey, and that extended both ways. The men's hockey series still was very good. Women's hockey earning their split, like we talked about. St. Thomas coming into the fold with them Friday night, a 3-2 loss for them, kind of a tough one, and then a 2-2 tie that the Huskies won in a shootout on home ice yesterday against, like I mentioned, St. Thomas entering. Taylor Lind, Ellie Anderson, the goal scorers on Friday night. Sonia Hola was in net on that first evening, and then it was Clara Himlerova and Olivia Savard tallying goals on Saturday. Emma Paluzny in net that night, and then St. Cloud's own Allie Cornelius burying the shootout winner in that one. So the team improving to 2-3-1 in the season. They're going to travel to Ohio State this Friday and Saturday for some WCHA action. That'll be a big test for them, I think, as well. And I think it's a good measuring stick. Ohio State's kind of been that middle of the pack team as far as the last big dog looking in, so to speak. Them and Duluth have kind of been filling that 3 and 4 spot in the WCHA. So it should be exciting. And it's nice to see the women's hockey team get off on a good foot. Really, in theory, they're 3-3-1, but that exhibition game against Bemidji State doesn't count. But they held their own against the Beavers as well too. So this team is on the rise and doing a lot of good things.
That is, speaking of stuff on the rise here, when we get to October, a lot of the signings we talked about, those restricted free agents signings finally getting completed. And then you get to the start of the season, these start to look at who needs to be signed in 2022 for the 2022-23 season. So we've had some extensions already. First is Charlie McAvoy, the Boston Bruins, 8-year, $76 million extension. For the Islanders, Ryan Pollock at 8 years as well. Brady Tkachuk, as we talked about, he was the last big RFA to be signed, 7 years, $57.5 million. And then again, coming back to some of the extensions for next year, Nashville locking up Matisse Ekholm, 4 years, $25 million. Nick Suzuki, the former Vegas Golden Knights draft pick, $63 million, 8 years. A lot of 8-year extensions being handed out to a lot of these players. Chicago read up Eric Goodbranson for a 1 year, and then Tampa Bay head coach John Cooper given a 3-year extension. Surprised it wasn't more after back-to-back Stanley Cups, but I digress from that. Only one trade was defenseman Olli Juolevi from Vancouver over to Florida. And then blue liner Noah Juleson for forward Juha Lamiko headed back to Vancouver. Yes, I did not pre-read the script, so thank you very much for you throwing me that my way early this Sunday morning after a very long 13.5-hour day on the broadcast yesterday.
The big gist is really good forward prospects.
Yes, very good forward prospects. And then Columbus, Boone Jenner, not transactionals, but named the 7th captain in franchise history after, again, Nick Foligno parted ways last season towards Toronto, then again re-signing as a free agent in Boston this season. Mark Giordano, obviously first captain in Seattle Kraken history. And speaking of the Kraken, they did win their first ever game here against Nashville in game number 2 of the season. So they're 1-1.
Yeah, not bad at all. Not too shabby. That would be 500, as the kids say. Our last topic, I did want to point out. I'm pretty good at that. Hey, I did want to point out, by the way, it was Eric Gustafson for Chicago, not Eric Goodbranson. Just a little side note there. The younger defenseman, Goodbranson, a little bit older, but kind of a journeyman NHLer. Who does Goodbranson play for nowadays? I don't even remember.
Isn't it Vancouver?
I thought it was Vancouver too. I could be wrong, but anyway, he's really had a journeyman career and really made the best of his time. As we kind of talked about Florida and their young guns, he was a longtime Florida Panther that really kind of carved his role as a steady third pairing defenseman, but third pairing defensemen, sometimes they're liable to injuries. We have some injury news and some interesting tidbits as well to close out the weekly roundup here. First, the NHL has announced that just 4 players remain unvaccinated as the season begins. And as things kicked off, the New York Rangers announcing that they have a new face on MSG Network. It's going to be longtime goaltender and franchise leader in a lot of statistics, Henrik Lundqvist. He joined their broadcast crew. He almost signed, of course, with the Washington Capitals to kind of finish off his career there, but unfortunately heart issues derailed that. But speaking of the Capitals, current captain and sharpshooter Alex Ovechkin has passed Marcel Dion to take 5th on the all-time goals list with 732. Nick, I see you raising your finger. I know exactly what you're going to say. You're going to say he did sign, but he didn't actually play a game. So technically he terminated his own contract. I just tried to keep it simple, but yes, I figured you were going to, in my head when I wrote it last night.
Any time that I can say you're wrong makes me feel good. So
I saw it. I saw the gears turning in your head. I'm like, I know what he's going to say. I'm like, I'm just trying to keep it simple. But speaking of simple things, in injury news, a couple of injuries. Washington Capitals having one of those, kind of a tough one for them. Nicholas Backstrom right now, long-term injured reserve with a hip injury right now. Toronto's going to be without Peter Mrazek in net for 2 weeks, and Ilya Mikheyev 8 weeks, broken thumb for him. Yeah, boy, it's a tough one for him after essentially asking to be traded. And then Austin Matthews is day-to-day. Vegas, a difficult time for them right now. The one that we know about, Max Pacioretty, he's week to week with a fractured foot. And then Mark Stone, still haven't heard anything on him, but didn't look very good. And then the last one, Vancouver's Brandon Sutter, out for the foreseeable future with long-term complications from COVID-19.
Just a quick note on Ilya Mikheyev. That's quite the injury luck. Remind you, Mikheyev was the one that took the state to the wrist, I believe, and it was out for half of the season, I think 2 years ago. And made a recovery. And then, as you mentioned, this year during the summer was essentially not happy with his role, was asking for a trade. Toronto said no, thank you. And I think he was getting a look on the top 6, if I recall. And then, unfortunately, now gets a broken thumb. So I don't know if that's hockey karma, but that's just not good luck for Ilya Mikheyev.
Yeah, maybe it's just Kyle Dubas saying, all right, we're going in. We're snapping this kid's thumb. We're not going to make it happen. No, that doesn't happen in the NHL. I'm kidding. But nonetheless, that will do it for the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. And welcome in episode number 83, Noah Grant alongside Nick Maxon. Early on this Sunday morning, Nick, you were busy and back at it in the hockey world, especially last night. You did a fantastic job on Fox 9 during Husky Productions during the game. Heard a lot of compliments on social media, as well as my own parents. They were actually they're big Golden Gopher fans, and they actually got to take in the game last night on NCHC TV because of the way the scheduling worked. And it's kind of funny. My my mom texted me and she goes, "Did they just say Nick Maxon?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Is that your Nick Maxon?" I'm like, "There ain't a lot of Nick Maxons that I know of that do Huskies hockey, but nonetheless, good job, man."
Thank you, man. Not the most clean performance in some of those things. There was actually in the post game for the men's. Actually, you have notes written on my laptop, and I'm usually looking halfway up at the screen as well as on my notes, just to make sure that as you're describing what's happening at matches, and I actually lost my spot. So I was trying to remember the Gopher players for his first goal, Aaron Howland, and I feel so terrible because, first collegiate goal, I mean, your parents, that's kind of like part of that thrill, as you get your name called on television, and I goofed it up. So I'm not so happy about that, but overall, not terrible. We'll have to just make sure we highlight those names in the notes next time. But I felt pretty good. Again, 2 really, really good games to call yesterday. A big reason why I think I'm so brain dead today, just today. So do not ever jump on my case about that. It's just a lot of hockey. Again, that crew, such a great job. HP is certainly the premier student-run organization. And for those who don't know, who watch the Fox 9 broadcast, there is nothing that isn't done by a student other than Jim, Pat, and Mark. Everything else, graphics, the cameras, again, myself and Rachel being the 2 personalities on the screen that you're seeing, but so many behind the scenes to do such an incredible job putting that together. It is it's just such a great group to be part of. And for those, honestly, who want to get into broadcasting, who are looking at that, to know that that's all student run, go to St. Cloud State, and that's no joke. I wouldn't be where I am right now without being at that school. So get your butts up there if you want to, get a job in sports broadcasting. So
yeah, I would definitely agree. My question is, first of all, Cam 1, the main camera, was that Gavin Nelson last night? Who was
not Gavin Nelson. In fact, a lot of the crew this year are first timers. In fact, actually, Gavin was actually beside me covering in the replay room. We had a crew member go down last week or so with an illness. So just out of caution, we decided, we're just not going to risk it. So he covered the replay. There's another person that's a second year for a replay. And so, again, you talk about some of the harder jobs, obviously being the technical director. So the one that's switching between the look switching and the graphics, that's such a fast moving job. The audio board is insanely difficult with so many sliders. You've seen that audio board when I've done some basketball games, Noah, it's that same one. But replay, man, you got myself who's trying to, pull clips for my, because you're producing that, so when I'm in the replay room and watching the games, I'm watching a screen that's got 17 different looks. And so I get to kind of pick and choose which highlights go in the intermission reports. And so not only they're listening to me, but they got to listen to the producer, listen to the director. It's a very difficult position. And, a lot of those guys, they just rocked it last night. So a really good showing for Husky Productions on Fox 9 Plus yesterday.
It is kind of incredible, actually, for people who don't know what goes on behind the scenes, especially with live TV, how many different people are in control of various aspects, and more importantly, how little people are in control of overseeing all of those aspects at once, if that makes sense. So, the producers, they do a fantastic job, and obviously all the people, right on down to the janitor who sweeps the floors. I mean, it's just incredible to see how the product comes together, and how many people do play a hand in that. So no, I mean, it was fun to watch. Did a really nice job. I had, not only, let me say, I said my parents, my dad went to the University of Minnesota, so they were watching the game, but I had a couple of other friends who were watching the game too, who said the same thing, that, because of course they know that I went to St. Cloud State. They said they do a really great job there on the broadcast. So obviously it was exciting to see you be a part of it. And, I had a friend over watching the game last night, and I said, during the post-game show, of course, they were, Jim, Pat, and Mark were breaking down kind of what happened. And I said, can we get to the part where my friend is on the TV? Let's get to that part. I want to see that part. So, of course, we love Jim, Pat, and Mark as well. We want to get Mark on the show at some point. We'd love to have him one day. But of course, Pat Micheletti, a two-time guest, and Jim Rich joined you about a month and a half ago. So, obviously, three really great guys to cover some Huskies hockey. They had an enjoyable broadcast last night, I thought, as well too. Just three boys, for lack of a better term, shooting the shit, talking hockey. So it was exciting to see that as well too. But you could see it. You could see it on Mark's face. That definitely was not the way they wanted that game to end last night. But we're going to get into some men's hockey in just a second. I want to start quickly here with the women's hockey team. A 3-2 loss, a tight one on Friday night. Sani Ahola in net. I believe she had 14 saves on 17 total shots. So it was just one of those games where it was quality over quantity for St. Thomas. And then 2-2 tie with that shootout victory for Allie Cornelius, Emma Plusny in net on that one. Nick, St. Thomas, kind of an unknown foe for this women's hockey team. We finally see Clara Himmler-Over get on the board a little bit and back into action, I should say. Olivia Savard looking good, tallying her points. Taylor Lind is on the board too. What do you take away from this women's hockey team against a team that you really didn't know a whole lot about coming in?
First of all, for St. Thomas, man, they look pretty darn good. And for those, I think the bigger question is who's coaching this team. That's Joel Johnson. He was the assistant for the Gophers for the last 10 years. So they've got a pretty good pedigree and up at the head coach position. And then one of the assistant coaches, I don't know, this might ring a bell for those on the men's side, Marty Surdich. Yeah. This team is a very, very well coached, very respected folks, especially in the Minnesota hockey landscape. And you can see it with their offense. They're really, really good in terms of, trying to create cycles, trying to, get to the middle of the ice, get to the front of the net. And defensively, very, very good as well. I know Friday night, Huskies had over 40 shots on net. But if you look at the shot chart, a lot of them coming from those low danger areas, from the sidewall, from the point. Also did a good job of blocking shots and deflecting shots. So, this team is starting to play the right way. And again, you can tell that, with just, some of the things I saw yesterday, the Huskies were trying to, essentially switch from trying to set up zone time to try to get some offense on the rush, just because, again, it was so hard, even with puck possession in the offensive zone, to really turn anything from that into a grade A scoring opportunity. And you got to give St. Thomas credit for protecting their netminder. There were some breakdowns here and there, on both sides, but for the most part, I think the Huskies, were probably secondary for offense. I think the Huskies did play very well defensively too in front of Emma Plusny, so that helped help them. But, and then also for the Huskies, the tale for this week is missed opportunities. Oh my gosh. The ones that they did have and the ones they break through, they were ones where that's probably the next step for this hockey team, honestly, is, teams like Wisconsin and Minnesota, they bury those. St. Cloud isn't quite capitalizing on all those opportunities that they are creating, that they do get into those high danger areas. So there's still some growth, but for overall, I mean, St. Cloud still, I feel like this year they're playing with a much better pace. They're actually creating offense in different ways. They look like they're playing poised and confident with the puck, and they've got 2 freshman defensemen out there that actually know how to move the puck, move their feet, actually can read the ice incredibly well. So they're making strides. As you mentioned, they're kind of back to the 500 mark almost, if you want to throw in the exhibition game, but still continuing to stride forward. I think I don't think it's unfair to say that if this team reaches 500, that's still a very, very big stride forward for this hockey club, and they're playing with some confidence right now, which is huge for that squad as well.
I think 5th place in the WCHA is definitely attainable for this group. And I think it was last year too, but this group I think is taking that another step forward. And you talked about that, that piece of just having that killer instinct. And this team, they haven't really had that really go-to goal scorer, so to speak. I would say, maybe a couple of years ago, maybe Hallie Theodosopoulos maybe would probably be your best go-to goal scorer from a couple of years ago. And then of course you go, Julia Tilke might've been another player that you threw in there as well. But yeah, this group, you're finding ways for this group, to start to generate a little bit of offense at least. And I kind of relate it back to my men's hockey league. We have a couple players who, they're just getting into the swing of things, of learning how to play hockey and getting better at it and stuff. And they get frustrated when they, get an opportunity where they're in position on the short side and someone makes a pass behind the net and they get a puck on net and the goaltender makes a save. And obviously you want to finish those as you get better and stuff. But, I always tell them, being in the right position and doing the right play is half the battle. And sometimes goaltenders get them. Sometimes you break a stick, it doesn't matter. But for this group, like you mentioned, that next piece is finding that killer instinct and being a group that when the other team gives up a 2-on-1 against them, the other team is like, oh crap, like we're in trouble now. Instead of feeling like they can activate a defenseman because they can give up a rush and they'll be okay. So St. Cloud slowly turning themselves into that team that can push back transitionally and offensively and be able to create a couple of those opportunities too. So I think it's a great building step for them, but we're going to have a really tough test for Ohio State next weekend. Should be a good one there. Nick, did you have anything else you wanted to add here on the women's hockey front?
Also, Allie Cornelius, what a shootout goal.
Yeah,
for those who watched that, little stutter step, if we were to call it, a little stick handle, waits for the goaltender to open up and slid it 5-hole. That's a goal scorer's goal, for Allie Cornelius. So I think that was either round 4 or round 5. That shootout, goaltenders actually are making quite a bit of saves. So yeah, five rounds. That's
yep.
And then Emma Paluzny, there definitely was. You could tell there was a scouting book on Emma Paluzny that they were trying to go above her blocker. I saw at least 3, I think, of the attempts trying to go high blocker on Paluzny. She was equal to the task. So good job for Emma to keep the Huskies in the shootout, and great finish there by Cornelius there to just secure that shootout win and an extra point there in the standings, which every point is so important.
Yeah. And it goes back to that skill piece too, is the Huskies being able to hang in during that piece of, I don't want to say adversity, but in a shootout, I mean, it's any person's game at that point. It's mono per se, shooter versus goaltender, and having a good goaltender helps, but also having a good shooter that has that put away skill. Like you mentioned, it was a beautiful move. And if you didn't get a chance to check it out, I would say Huskies women's hockey at CSU Huskies _WHC all caps is a great place to find some replays of that goal. Is a really nice shot, as you had mentioned. Moving over to the men's hockey side, we'll start with some trivia here. And the trivia question, I would say, is will probably irk the ire of at least somebody, I'm sure. But anyway, the trivia question for season 3 did read, Bob Motzko returned to the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center last night for the first time after 13 seasons with St. Cloud State men's hockey. During his time behind the bench for the Huskies, how many first team All-Americans came out of St. Cloud State?
6 of them.
No, Yes. Yes. 6 of them came from the first team. I believe it's, I can't remember if it's 7 or 8 all time between first and second team. I think it's also Ryan Lash and Bobby Gepfert are the second team All-Americans in that group. But yes, 6 of them. The Spive was the winner. He's a first time winner. So 6 first team All-Americans coming out of there. Nick Jensen, Drew LeBlanc in 2013, Nick Dowd, who we had on the show about a month and a half ago in 2014, Charlie Lindgren and Ethan Perau in 2017, and Jimmy Schultz in 2018. Then right after he left, Jimmy Schultz again, and then Patrick Newell in 2019 probably were pretty instrumental in Bob Motzko's tenure, getting them to that point. Nick, men's hockey, we've got the big discussion on hand, but let's rewind the tape a little bit. Let's start with Friday night's performance. Maybe not the best performance, I would say, for the Huskies. Kind of similar a little bit to the Mankato series, where they didn't have the greatest start, but they kind of survived, hung in a hockey game, found a way to win the game on Friday, despite low shot attempts. What did you garner from the home and home series the first night on the Olympic sheet down there at 3M Arena?
First of all, yes, that was an incredibly slow start by the Huskies. But, sometimes these bigger games, going into Mariucci, that's a big building. And actually it was a building that, for once had a little bit less empty seats than it normally has. So, yeah. Sorry, Gophers, but I have to kind of knock you on that. I mean, come on. I mean, seriously. Yeah. And honestly, if you really want me to be truly an in-state rival, a top 5 matchup, there shouldn't have been an empty seat in that building. Yeah. I'll put it that way. But the Huskies, I think, had some nerves going into this game, going against the big bad wolf, per se, of Minnesota college hockey. And I just saw a team that was just committed to defense. That's really what I saw. I saw a team that was going to play above the puck, a team that was going to block shots. They made life a living hell for the Gophers in the offensive zone. Unfortunately, like you had pointed out, probably spent a little bit too much time in the defensive zone, but we talked about how good teams capitalize on very little chances. Hey, a bobble to Bulangami currently goes into the breakaway and he pots that one. And then Mason Salk was just this simple play, that his second straight game-winning goal, following up and just tapping one in between the pads of Jack LaFontaine. Supposedly, he's a Mike Richter Award winner. Supposedly. No, he's actually a good goaltender. So I had to get a little bit of a knock in there. No, he was pretty good this weekend when he needed to be. But yeah, not the offensively forecheck driven Huskies that that's kind of the identity of this hockey team. But when you talk about experiences, you talk about what that run through April did to this team last year, is that good teams can find different ways to win. And there's no question that St. Cloud was able to just keep everything to the outside. In fact, I watched the second intermission. I believe it was either Blake McLaughlin or I can't remember the other captain's name, but I think it was Ben Clymer asking, what do you do? And they just literally had a loss for words, like, we're doing everything we can, but I don't know how we're going to get a puck in behind, their forwards and their D. They're blocking everything. So, at the end of it, Friday, a defensive front, it kept a very skilled, a very fast moving Gopher team frustrated on offense, and the Huskies able to pull off that one 2-1. That was my thoughts on Mariucci. I don't know what you saw, Noah, but, again, it's encouraging. Because again, if your offense is there, just know this team can defend. And if there's one player, it's not going to be Brendan Bushy. Had a hell of a game on Friday.
Yeah, I think that there's one name and 2 words that summarize the new identity per se of this Huskies team. And you and I have talked about it before. And I think it's exciting to kind of see them get to this point in an odd fashion. The name is Dave Shayak, and the 2 words are grease pan goals. And this team and St. Cloud State, especially as you go back to the team that, lost to AIC and we go back historically, has kind of been that high flying, off the rush, skill-based team. And we saw last year, during tournament time, that they were finding a way to win battles when the tournament play got a little bit tighter, when open ice became a little bit more limited, and they found a way to get a little bit gritty. And I think we're starting to see this team transition into For lack of a better term, when you look at Western Michigan and the way that they play the game, the Huskies are starting to infuse a little bit of that into their game. And I think that that's what Dave Shayak, brings into that, is that little bit of grit, that sandpaper that you talked about, where, yeah, you like to have your Yami Kranilis coming in on a breakaway, making a nice skill play. But you look at the first goal on Saturday, Sam Henches, a shot that starts with a forecheck, with Nolan Walker deflecting a stick, getting a bounce, a shot from the point. I think it was Seamus Donahue that shot that puck. And then you get a chaos in front and Sam Henches finds the rebound. That's, of course, Saturday's game. But you're starting to see a team that we mentioned on Friday with limited shot attempts create those opportunities, win battles on the half wall, take care of their own zone, when they're under duress. That's tournament hockey. That's what happens during tournament time. It's not necessarily this high-flying, high-scoring offense. And I think a prime example of that, when we welcome Wisconsin to town next weekend, they're really reeling from the loss of a guy like Cole Caulfield, because Cole Caulfield had so much of that speed and skill that he was able to kind of overpower that, mentality, so to speak, because of his skill set. But by and large, you look at them without Cole Caulfield and, of course, missing a couple of other pieces, they're having to rely a little bit more on that heavy game, but they just don't have enough of that grittiness mixed with skill to kind of make it happen so far in their season. They're still a good hockey team. They're still a top 20 team in the country, but they're not to the level of, I think, where they were last year. And that's part of that, because unlike St. Cloud, they haven't found that fusion hybrid between skill and grit right now. So I think a lot of Huskies fans from the last weekend against Mankato, and then, of course, Friday moving into Saturday against the Gophers, were a little bit distressed with the quote unquote lack of offense. But I think you got to remember, you're playing 2 top 5 teams in the country, and you're finding ways to not only hang with teams, but win. And I think Saturday's game, the Gophers were lucky to escape that hockey game. They played well in the second period to earn their lead heading into period number 3, but it was all Huskies in the third, and they were carrying that momentum into overtime. And unfortunately, we all know how that one ended. So let's move over to Saturday, shall we? Let's talk about the good first. I thought the Huskies started really strong on Saturday, a little bit more jump, especially on home ice. A great crowd. Great to see the Huskies fans packing the Herbrooks National Hockey Center. Second period, they didn't keep their foot on the gas, kind of took their foot off the gas pedal, and the Gophers really found a way to convert. And the third period was just some of the best college hockey you're going to see. Nick, before we get to the overtime call, what did you take away from regulation in that hockey game?
First of all, the return of Sam Henches and what that does to that top line.
Yes.
Holy buckets. Sam Henches was a guy that was on a mission. And you probably heard some of the comments that I had about him. No, I'm kidding. No, that's when Sam Henches is healthy, and when Sam Henches, is playing with a purpose. That's what you get. A guy that, you talk about a guy that was every stride, every skate. He was skating like he was like about to kill somebody. I don't know how else to say it. Yeah. He was definitely he was dialed into this hockey game. And as you mentioned too, Sam, known for his skill, kind of getting that dirty. In fact, it was Henches, Walker, and I even believe, was it Brodzinski? All three of them were in that crease area when the puck was loose. So you talk about, again, that Shayak influence about following up the shot and getting into those areas and winning puck battles. And then a puck gets it behind the offense team for the first goal. Really liked that. The second period, So the long change period, right? Noah, we talk about this a lot. In fact, it was actually a polar opposite from Friday. In fact, I think the Huskies had the better, of the Gophers in the second period. It was quite the opposite. When the Gophers really started to work the puck more down to the low end of the hockey rink, instead of doing that high cycle, we're looking for that offense created from their defense. And mind you, their defensive core, as far as offensive talent, holy cow, they're pretty good. You gotta tip your hat. But the Gophers decide, if we're not going to have a lane there, then let's just kill time. Let's tire them out. That's the one big difference. That they were really trying to force shots through on Friday, and on Saturday they were a lot more patient, trying to wait for that opening, wait for a lane to open up instead of trying to force it through, having shots blocked, and then having the puck come out to neutral and then having to reset. So that was the big thing. The Huskies were hemmed. They were tired. They couldn't really generate much, but they survived, right? Yep. So they only gave up 2. And really the second goal of Bryce Brodzinski, it was kind of just a goofy play. And then a shot through screen after Bryce just took it to the middle and then just turned and let it rip. That's a tough play for a goaltender to read, especially from behind the net coming out so quick. You don't know. Yeah. You're trying to worry about maybe a pass to the opposite side. And a release like Bryce Brodzinski, usually you'll find the back of that circumstance more often than not. Third period, as you mentioned, the Huskies dominated that period. Jack Peart getting his first goal in a Husky uniform, a C&I shot somehow going through all that traffic, but hey, it
right
goes
mentality.
in.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for Jack Peart, he's had some growing pains, but man, in the defensive zone, he looks phenomenal. He's an incredibly patient person with the puck. It's like he's got ice in his veins. He's going to be, whether it's after this season or maybe next for Nick Perbix, he's going to be his direct replacement, no question, on that top pairing on the blue line. But and then the Gophers answer 53 seconds later. So, I mean, you talk about, building momentum, and the Gophers kind of a goofy bounce. I'm not sure if it actually hit the stick of Sammy Walker. We didn't have a greatest camera on it, but again, if it goes in, they don't ask how, they ask how many, right, Noah? Mm-hmm. So that one squeaks through. Huskies were pressing, couldn't really get a ton. And then on the power play again, V-team yet. And he's been really good in the power play as far as being the quarterback on the half wall. Still a lot left to be desired for him in 5-on-5. That's a whole separate conversation with that line of Crandall, Mietten, and they had Zach Okabe back there, a line that was actually pretty darn good for their run last year, but hasn't really found a lot of offensive production so far early this season. So they tie it up. Noah Walker, the beautiful man, this Noah Walker looks so good these last couple of weekends. He's just on fire. And then do we get into the overtime already?
I want to say the other piece, look at the goals of the way the Huskies scored in the third period. It goes back to that grittiness around the front of the net. I do want to point one thing out about Jami Krannila. I actually was a little more impressed, I think, than maybe you were. And simply because I like that he shoots the puck. He's got a cannon of a shot. He's not afraid to use that. And he had, I think it was through the first period, I think he had 4 shot attempts already in that game. So he does shoot the puck. And I don't think he's being rewarded, but I think that's kind of what we see, is that you see some shooters. I think a good example maybe at the NHL level is maybe Ryan Donato, a guy that, kind of scores by volume a little bit. I think Kevin Fiala is maybe a little bit that way too, where puts a lot of pucks on net. Kirill Kaprizov, I think, fits in that mold too, but Kirill Kaprizov is just another animal entirely. But the Huskies, kudos to them for clawing back in that game. And like I said, I think if Nick Perbix is actually able to step around the net cleanly, he would have led a very nice rush up the ice, and the Huskies, I think, would have had a very good look at trying to score here. So let's get into it. The Huskies losing the opening faceoff, actually forcing a really nice turnover in their own zone. It was actually a really nice curl back for Nick Perbix to kind of slow things down and try to not only reset, but also beta forward into following him behind the net. Anytime as a defenseman you can get a forward to follow you, usually means you burn them around the other side of the net. Okay, so let's get a couple things out of the way here, Nick. First of all, that was a penalty, and that's a penalty at any point during a hockey game. I think the first... Now,
let's clarify. When you say penalty, because we've heard a couple different penalties that the fan bases would like to have called, what penalty are you describing?
I'm calling that a hold, simply because of the fact that a jersey tug. And when I say it's a penalty at any point in the game, I mean that in this way. There are some calls that can kind of go by the wayside as you push into overtime. The referees do not want to influence a hockey game, or shouldn't want to influence a hockey game. As you kind of get into calls that are kind of 50-50, can go either way. If there's not a clear advantage gained by a team, you start to see the penalty calls dwindle as the tension gets tighter and you get later into the game. That's a call that gets called at 19:07, left on the clock in period number 1. That's a call that should get called at any point. I mean, it was one of those that you watched it and it was almost in slow motion, where it was like, they're not going to call that. Oh, they're actually not going to call that. Like, wow. Okay. And it's kind of difficult to think about what is going through the official's mind. The only thing that I can think of, is it a makeup call? My thought was this too. I mean, did he think that maybe he caught the side of the net coming around the net from his vantage point? But before I get to your point, Nick, the one thing I want to point out, and we saw this on social media so much last night. We had a great conversation with Ben Holden about it. And of course he had a beautiful tweet. I'm no lawyer, but that's a lot of evidence. That was pretty good. It's not a dive. And I'll tell you why it's not a dive, not just from a objective hockey perspective. It's not a dive because of this. When you dive as a hockey player, every hockey player's done it at least once to sell a call. It's easy to dive when you get tripped and your momentum's taking you forward, or you're falling forward, or you're falling sideways. Because in order to dive, you have to kind of like convince your body or sell your body into doing that motion. it's easy to fall forward, intentionally. I don't know a hockey player in the world that can intentionally make it look like they're falling backwards smoothly and dive backwards. Like, think about that just from a pure like body positioning proprioception point of view. You'd have to be willing to throw your own body backwards, like your own head backwards towards the ice. That's like, I've never seen anyone dive like that. Like, it's just difficult to dive backwards. It doesn't, from a human body standpoint, especially when Perbix has the puck and is stepping out, it doesn't make any sense. The way that his feet go out from underneath him is just a clear indication of someone who had momentum, and all of a sudden center of mass was pulled and it took his momentum, his upper body, in a different direction. I mean, that was, it was about as blatant of a call, or should have been, as you can get as far as holding could be. So anybody who says that it's a dive, I think Bob Motzko even said it was a dive.
Well, he gets paid to say that though for his team. So
I don't even know how you come to the conclusion that it's a dive, because if it was a dive, it would look so awkward and unnatural, I think, versus how smooth his feet came out from under him the way that he was pulled. But anyway, Nick, your thoughts.
So, I've watched the clip. I can't even tell you how many times, right? Mm-hmm. And, the jersey tug, it's been all over social media. But it's easy to say that from the broadcast angle, right? So I try to put myself in the referee's position, right? He's right in front of the play. He's in the corner. But the one thing that I've come to the conclusion on is where that jersey tug is taking place is directly behind his line of sight. Right. So the only really thing I can think of is, no, it's not a flop. But maybe did the referee think that, like you mentioned, did he hit the net, or maybe did he just go off balance?
Yeah.
Maybe just the referee saw it as he, just kind of like lost an edge and fell at his own power.
Yeah.
Because if you watch the referee after the play happens, he actually points down at the ice a couple different times, like indicating because if it's a flop, there's still a whistle being called, right? There's still a stoppage of play. There's a couple of people who try to play the middle game, like, oh, if that's a hold and that's a flop, I'm taking both. No, that's not how that worked either. So first of all, no, not a flop in the slightest. And I think you did a really good job of breaking down just, again, even coming around behind the net, when you get pulled, when you're trying to lean in, your weight's on your outside skate, right? So, if you get pulled back, you're basically putting that weight on that pivot. I mean, and then you kind of get turned around, right? Mm-hmm. So, you kind of wonder, because I think the game was actually called very well up until that point. And I think it's also important to say here, Noah, that, even let's just say the penalty was indeed called, which it should have been. Does that mean the Huskies win? No. Does that mean the Gophers still may have come out on top? Sure. Yeah. I'll give you that.
And I think the piece is, from an objective hockey perspective, if the play comes out of the zone and comes back in the zone, we're kosher. We're fine, honestly. Right. Because at that point, the play has reset. The advantage didn't directly lead to a scoring opportunity and a goal. That's what it comes down to. It was so what do you call it? It was so telling that even, I think, was it Sammy Walker? But everybody literally stopped. Everybody stopped, was like, and he threw his hands up like crap. Right. Yeah. And there were folks who were like, you're such a homer. Like, that was a total flop. If that was, Huskies making that, you would say that was a flop too. I'm like, no, I would be saying, hey, idiot, why are you taking such a dumb penalty in overtime when there was no need to take a penalty there? Yeah, 200 feet from your own cage. 200 feet from your own net, right? And like I said, my parents are Gophers fans. They called me after the game and they said, what the hell was that? They said, that's ridiculous. They said, that's shameful. So, and I think a lot of Gopher fans in the building, and we had seen too that probably about 9 or 10 players in the line for the Gophers even said the same thing, that what was the deal with that? What was that? So, and that's where you go beyond the rivalry and just be objective and say, eesh, not a way you want to win a hockey game. You'll take it if you're Minnesota, but
of course you'll take it. I think, if you're a player in this game, right, and again, this was a phenomenal back and forth hockey game. This was a top 5 matchup, no question about it. And I think Pat, Jim and Mark had talked about it. It's kind of stains the hockey game. And I think, you take away this play, right? And let's just say the Gophers still end up scoring, right? I'm not as upset as I am now that a call that should have easily been made, should have been made, is what directly leads to something like this. And again, with Sammy Walker, he's got the hands. Rennick was deep in his net. Nobody was reset there for the Huskies. Nobody. Yeah. Two converged on Blake McLaughlin. He had a nice heads up play. Everybody was completely disorganized after that for the Huskies. Kind of waiting for okay, wait, where's the whistle here, right? So you got to give credit to the Gophers there too, because again, when the referee pointed his hand down, like I said, I don't know if that indicates that he just slipped. But again, if it's a flop, the arm's going up and there's a whistle. That's a penalty.
They played through the whistle. Essentially,
you played through the whistle, right? You don't hear the whistle, you keep going, right? So you got to give him credit to there. And again, I'll re-mention this again. Let's just say the Huskies get a power play, they can't convert, and the Gophers come up with a nice rush because we get caught being too aggressive. They have plenty. I'm very, very fine with that, because then I can point at the Husky and say, got a little bit too aggressive there, right? I'm okay with losing in a hockey way. That was not a hockey play.
Yeah. Mark Parrish said it really well, though, as he said, and I have to agree with this. He said, there's nobody that's going to feel worse about this than the official, especially when he gets back into the room. He is human. And from his vantage point, like we talked about, he might have thought that Perbix just lost an edge too. And, he doesn't want to, be an influence and decide a hockey game like that. And, as we go back to that too, what if, in an alternate reality where he's not tugged and he does lose his balance, we're looking at that. And then the Huskies go on to lose that game. We're looking at that saying, yeah, it stinks the Huskies lost, but what a great non-call that was, because Perbix lost an edge. You know what I mean? Yeah. Exactly. There is a human element to this game. Like I said, I've talked about this story before. I lost my chance to go to a state tournament off a goal that actually went off the crossbar for the game winner. It happens. But with this being said, I think there's a couple things that we need to put in perspective here. Number one, we welcome Wisconsin next weekend. Huskies fans, they've been known to do this, and I get the frustration. And Kevin Fitzgerald said it, that it's going to fuel us for a long time. Let's take a breath. Let's take a step back. 4-3 loss in overtime, a split on the weekend to a top 5 team in the country, a split last weekend to a top team in the country at that time. You have a chance to, I think, sweep Wisconsin next weekend. A lot of good things to take from this hockey group. A well-played hockey game up to this point. A great effort on home ice, being down entering period number 3 at 2 points during that period to be able to bring themselves back into that hockey game. A lot of good things for this group. And a lot of things that we can take positives from and take a deep breath and say, okay, it was a 4-3 overtime loss. It's probably not going to burn us in the pairwise. Okay. A split is not going to burn us with the University of Minnesota. Okay. We got a good hockey team here. Okay. And don't let one play detract from how good this team is, how great those jerseys looked last night, by the way.
Yeah, they look really nice.
Those were beautiful. And what is to come for this group. And if anything, use that fuel for the fire, as Kevin said, in the right way. I think with Brett Larson and this coaching staff, you let the frustration kind of simmer a little bit last night and today. You reset on Monday, you get back to the drawing board, you get back to work, you get back to the grind. Mentally, I think that the coaching staff will do a great job to prepare this team to get ready for the upcoming foe in Wisconsin. And we're going to see a great Huskies hockey team this year. And if anything, like you mentioned, it'll fuel the fire a little bit. So the frustration's there. But it's not, it wasn't in the NCAA tournament. It wasn't the dagger that knocked them out. It's week number 3 of a very long hockey season, and finally a regular season in terms of scheduling that we had waited for a long time. So, and a lot of positives to take just in general. David Rennick, what a weekend he had. He was phenomenal.
A couple of weekends in a row. Yeah. He's played really, really well.
Looking like the goaltender we've hoped. So Nick, anything else that you take away from this series that was good?
Yeah. Final thoughts, on this. Again, I think we forget, in moments like these, you get so hyper focused on, that turning moment, per se. And as you mentioned, you kind of have to take a step back and look at this. You come in, you have, your I don't want to call it a tune-up game, but you have, a kind of an introduction with St. Thomas. You get 2 wins there, right? Then you go right to a number one team in the country and you split. The second, game where you win 3-1. You go into a very, very hostile environment in Mariucci. You win there. You lose in, a very goofy way at home in homecoming against the Gophers, but you're splitting against a number 4 team in the country, right?
Yep.
If there's anything another positive you can take away, this high level of competition this early, we're got to remember we haven't even stepped foot in the NCHC conference yet.
Yeah.
Talk about what this is doing to get this team ramped up and prepared for the gauntlet that is the NCHC conference, right? There's going to be a lot of teams that we've looked at and said that top 6 of the NCHC could be freaking good this year.
Yeah.
And again, we've
or the top 8
or the top 8, right? So, I mean, at the end of it, and Josh Fenton was in the building for Huskies Gophers yesterday. So again, he made the trip from Litchfield all the way up to St. Cloud to take in that hockey game. But yeah, I mean, there's some good to this too, right? I mean, you're gonna have a better advantage against Wisconsin to feel good. But again, I mean, you're going to be looking at the film, the Gophers, Mavericks, and again with the Badgers here to go, all right, here's some good opponents. And now how good would it be to feel ready, to feel battle tested a little bit to go into the NCHC conference schedule? I mean, so that's some positives. Honestly, it is some positives because again, North Dakota is always a team that plays the Huskies well. They're going to have that circled on their calendar. Obviously Duluth, they're a team that's right there with the Huskies neck and neck in that conference.
They had a great series with Bemidji this weekend too.
They did. So, and Bemidji, actually, I think yesterday took one in overtime over North Dakota. So for those who did the effing Hawks win? The answer is still no. So that's great. So, but no, and that's just it. You gotta look at this as, hey, we're getting ready. We're getting battle tested again, as we've talked about it before. This is the rebuilding part of the season, and then to have these matchups this early is really forcing the Huskies to have that steeper learning curve. And so it's going to only, I think, provide more positives and for this season as we move forward into the conference schedule.
Yeah. 2 thoughts for me. 2 great things to take away from this weekend. Number 1, regardless of the outcome, what a great weekend for college hockey and what a great weekend for Huskies fans getting back to the Herbrooks National Hockey Center, filling that building up. Kudos, Huskies fans, doing your job, getting college hockey back in that building. I mean, what a great atmosphere, and what a great opportunity to have a WCHA foe. And I think it'd be great if they have it every year, where at least the Gophers for sure come to town every year for that home and home series.
Should be
just fantastic. But yeah, Gophers fans, fill 3M Arena, or Huskies fans, let's bring the entire municipality of St. Cloud, Waite Park, and the surrounding area. Let's bring them down to 3M Arena and show them how Huskies hockey works. My favorite moment of the weekend, Nick, it's going to sound weird. After the goal is scored, after the overtime loss last night, David Rennick turns around, gets ready to snap his stick over the crossbar, and pretty much swung it into his glove hand and stopped himself, turned around, and skated up and got ready for the handshake line. That level of maturity, obviously a 5th-year player, but especially for a goaltender who the play is not on him at all by any means, had a fantastic weekend. To kind of reset and say, we're all right. We're doing okay.
One game.
It's one game. It's one game in week 3 of the season against, it's not like they lost to, no offense to them, not like they lost to Princeton, who might be ranked, number 58 in the country or something like that. They lost to a top 5 team in the country. It was a great learning experience for them. Great learning experience for a lot of these young players, Mason Salquist, Jack Peer, Josh Ludetke, players like that, get their first taste of growing pains, get their first taste of a slice of Huskies hockey history and how it has gone for this program in recent years. I have every reason to believe that this group will come out composed. They'll come out firing. And if anything, it'll poke the bear a little bit. I think we might even see a better Huskies hockey team come next weekend. And then after that, Nick, we're into some NCHC hockey already, and some great opponents, middle of the pack opponents potentially in the NCHC, although we never know how that's going to work till it shakes out. But what should be middle of the pack opponents if the Huskies play the right way. So a lot of great things to take. And I think David Rennick's example of letting the emotion be there, but not letting it negatively impact you and the way that you portray yourself and carry yourself as a hockey player. A lot of veteran leadership and a lot of great maturity shown from David Rennick in this group to move on to the next task, and they'll be better for it in the end, I think. So, Nick, I think that's going to do it. We're quite over time. Over time. Does that make sense? Let's just say we fell for that one. Oof. Anyway, that will do it for the regular portion of our show. Stick around for the extra ice session. We're going to talk a little bit about the Minnesota Wild and their first 2 wins as they have gone 2-0 on the season. And welcome in to the extra ice session. Nick Maxon is to my left. If you're watching the YouTube screen, I'm on your right. I'm Noah Grant. We're happy to have you here. A really great show so far. If you didn't get a chance to listen to some Huskies hockey talk, especially talking about, some controversial play, maybe go back and rewind. We'll talk about it for you. We'll break it down for you as always. The Minnesota Wild, no breakdowns for them, finding a way to take care of Anaheim in kind of gutsy fashion, 2-1. Marcus Foligno, the game winner, with 7.2 seconds on Friday. And then last night on Saturday, it was a California sweep. The Minnesota Wild hanging on for a 3-2 win, despite a goal that was disallowed for them. A very good showing, I thought, in the second half of that game for the most part against the LA Kings in the late night matchup there. Marcus Foligno leading this hockey team right now with 2 points, as well as Kirill Kaprizov and Kevin Fiala are the 3 lone players with 2 points on this roster. And Marcus Foligno has 19 of the 33 penalty minutes as well for this Minnesota Wild squad. Nick, we've seen a couple of line combinations, a couple of jugglings. Freddie Gaudreau getting a little bit more ice time than I think a lot of people would have given him credit for. Brendan Duheim, I think, has looked very well, had a goal disallowed yesterday. This Minnesota Wild team, thoughts on the lineup and their first couple wins to start the season.
Yeah, a little sloppy against Anaheim. Yeah, no question about it. But that's I think more rust than it is anything else. You're not going to have your best performance game 1, but you find a way to make it work. And the Moose got loose there. 7.2 seconds left, as you mentioned. Certainly the emotional leader on the hockey squad is Marcus Foligno. So happy to see him get rewarded and get on the score sheet as well. A little bit better on Saturday night here against the Los Angeles Kings. And speaking of the Kings, they look okay.
Yeah, they do.
They look okay. Victor Arvidsson and then Philip Deneau. Again, having that, bona fide second line center has really solidified that top 6 for Los Angeles. I think they're going to be a much better team this year.
And I hate to say it, but Drew Doughty did look good, except for the defensive lapse that he got beat on last night. He did look good, but man, I hate Drew Doughty anyway.
He plays with an edge, right? And you have to kind of match fire with fire. And Ryan Hartman, they've been battling. Kaprizov and them like to battle. And when Ryan Hartman scored that goal and let me know about it pretty emphatically, that was pretty funny. That's that game within the game, right? That you talk about as a hockey players, those little battles, when you're on shift or shift to shift, you get matched up against certain players. There's definitely some numbers that you take as a player and go, yeah, it would just be nice to win a battle against him, and then try to make something, get on the score sheet somehow. And for Ryan Hartman, first of all, and I thought maybe one extra pass too many from Victor Rask there. I believe it was the one that set him up. Yeah. But Ryan Hartman, good backhand forehand over the roof there of Jonathan Quick and able to pop that one up high and get the loud celebration right in front of Drew Doughty. So, but that's hockey, right? I mean, you're going to have those villains and you're going to have those personalities that you have to battle through. And so far, the Wild, again, 2 wins on the season. Is LA the best team in the world? No. Is Anaheim the best team in the world? No. You could say Anaheim's probably in a nice deep rebuild, but at the end of it, you're going to have a little bit better competition on Tuesday as the Wild return home for Winnipeg. I can't remember. I know they played last night too, if they had won their game, but at the end of it, it's some confidence early. Kaprizov looks as we expected. He hasn't quite found the back of the twine just yet, but him with Zuccarello, still that chemistry is widely there. I know that looks like Dean Evans. I also saw this in last night's game. Sometimes you put Victor Rask back there instead of Eriksson Ek, a little bit of line juggling as to try to see if there's some offensive end. Did you have a scoreboard update?
Yes, I do. The Jets are actually 0-2 on the season. They lost 4-3 last night against the Sharks. So in San Jose. So the Sharks, I don't mean to be that guy, but they are undefeated at 1-0 right now, as are the Buffalo Sabres.
They're 2-0.
Yeah, which is weird. Anyway,
so what ends up happening is what's called a market correction. So it would be shocking if any of that trend would continue for either squad.
Yeah. Speaking of trends in the Central, though, the kind of a side tangent, what is going on in Chicago?
What the heck? Oh,
13 goals allowed in 3 games. Of course, losing on Friday 4-3. That I think Chicago, if I'm not mistaken, played last night. Yeah, losing 5-2 to the Penguins last night.
Right?
Yeah, tough.
Oof. And from what it sounds like, it's been their starts, right? I guess they've been getting outscored like 6-0 in the first period. So it's been, they're taking themselves out of hockey games before they're putting themselves into hockey games. And, in the NHL, we talk about this college hockey too, but there's teams, and the good teams, they know how to clamp down, and, they get 2 or 3 goal lead, and good luck trying to get back at them. NHL, it's even more tough, right? Especially if you have good teams that have good defensive structure, and you can get a 2-goal lead. You're confident you can just lock things down. For Chicago, really thought, especially with the addition of Marc-Andre Fleury, Seth Jones, that this team was going to be a little bit reinvigorated, but so far not so much. And is it maybe the fact that it's so many new faces and they're just not quite in sync just yet? It could be that there. No, I think might be a fair assessment. Again, I haven't watched them play just yet, but just thinking in terms of how much turnover Chicago has had, especially this offseason, I'm kind of wondering if it's just not everybody's on the same page just yet. So because if you look at that roster for Chicago, this should be much better than 0-3. And I do have a gut instinct that tells me that give them some time and they'll turn it around. I really do think they will.
Yeah, definitely. The team that I'm actually really impressed with right now, it's actually out in the Pacific. That's Edmonton. Edmonton.
Do they have some guys that are good on that team or something?
Yeah.
Or?
I mean, they won 5-2 against Calgary last night. Of course, you talk about Chicago and their little piece too. Moving Duncan Keith in that trade. I think the Oilers are going to look very good this year. And not that they don't, but I think they're going to look good beyond the impact of Draisaitl and McDavid. I guess they've impressed me through 2 games. So have the Panthers. Obviously 5-1 Sam Bennett, a hat trick last night against the Islanders. I think the Panthers are finally becoming that team that we had expected. But moving back to the Minnesota Wild, a lot of great things to take care of. Of course, Kirill Kaprizov on the board early, part of that team leader, so to speak, with 2 assists. That's always good to see. I think it'd be nice Eriksson Ek, getting him on the board, and maybe Jared Spurgeon and throw Nick Bukestad in there as well. If you can get those 3 guys on the board in the next game or 2, I think that'll just build a little bit more confidence. But, this Minnesota Wild team has depth in a weird way. They don't have center depth. I think that's let's put that out there right now.
They never had that, so that's not new.
Yeah, exactly. I think Mikko Koivu could probably come back in and be a 3rd-line center on this team.
Maybe second, maybe of some nights.
Yeah. Which I think everybody would love that, because everyone loves Mikko Koivu, right? They've never had any issues with him in the latter stage of his career.
Not once.
Anyway, they have depth. We've always talked about this team winning by committee. But the way that they balance their lines, I kind of like it. They've really got that true forward. I feel like on each line that is that gritty forward. They've got that forward on that line that is kind of that skill-based guy that's going to pot a couple of goals, but really is kind of a playmaker. And then they've got a goal scorer on each line. And it's kind of been an interesting mix to see, who is playing what role and who fits in. I got to be honest with you, Nick. Again, we're talking about centers, a guy that everyone's been hard on. Victor Rask, I thought, has looked very good to me.
He's fine.
Yeah, he's the only forward. I know this doesn't take a lot of heat-ins, but there's only 3 players on this Minnesota Wild team who are +2. John Merrill and Dmitry Kulikov, which is a great sign for Minnesota. And then Victor Rask is the only other one that's +2 on the forward side. So I mean, don't read into that obviously too much, but with 10.5 minutes of ice time, he's got a point to his credit. A shooting percentage right now at 25 with 4 total shots in the season. I think he's doing all the right things right now. And, like we talked about, if he's getting paid $1.5 million a year, do we have a problem with this? I don't think that we do. I think he's looked very well. Another guy that I think has kind of flown under the radar right now, and a guy that we've kind of been waiting a little bit for, he hasn't been exceptional, but he's looked good. I think Jordan Greenway has looked okay. I think he's possessed the puck all right, controlled the puck along the half wall, and looked all right with his puck possession game. Just not a guy that has a lot of get up and go, I think, just because of the nature of his size. And, he's not a very speed-based guy, but, I think he's looked okay. Marcus Foligno just continues to be an animal, definitely worthy of the A on his sweater. He's looked very good. And that 3rd pairing defense, Dmitry Kulikov, John Merrill, they've looked very good so far.
It looks good. So,
yeah. And I think that 1st pairing, I think Alex Goligoski, Jared Spurgeon, if you can get them into the points column a little bit, would be important. So, and goaltending has been more than adequate with Cam Talbot and net. So, Nick, I mean, what are you anticipating here with this group as they kind of face Winnipeg and get ready? We should actually pull up their schedule here for the week. Let me see if I can find that as I'm kind of talking to you there. But this Minnesota Wild group, is there anything that you're feeling really great about? And is there one thing that you're thinking this needs some serious tweaking right away?
I mean, it's only 2 games, right? So you don't want to go over the top with it.
Not that we've ever done that as Minnesota sports fans, but
not at all, right? So we just can't have nice things. A couple of things that I don't know if I'll rephrase the question a little bit. A couple of things I'm looking for this squad as we continue throughout the season a little bit. How about Freddie Gaudreau getting on the board yesterday? He's put himself in some pretty good spots on that line. Him and Fiala, there obviously is some chemistry there, and Fiala is kind of being more of the setup guy. When for Gaudreau, kind of seen him in the slot set up for a one-timer. Again, he did pot one, and he's got a decent shot. But more so, it's the fact that he's going to the scoring areas and they're finding him there. That level of just offensive, creativity and creating those grade A chances, I think it's going to go a long way for this Minnesota Wild squad. There's one thing that I think was obvious in Vegas last year, this last playoff run was, obviously they shut down Kaprizov and it seemed like the entire offense just came to a stall, right? But if you're going to have multiple lines are able to create, right? Not necessarily produce, but at least create, that's something to think about. That will eventually wear on teams. And then also eventually, if these things continue to build, those are going to be chances that are going to actually finally start finding the score sheet too. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of that production from that second and especially that third line. Yeah. I guess what's yet to be for me, if there's anything to be desired, is it's early, right? So Kulikov and John Merrill have looked good. Can they continue that? And also, can we please avoid an injury on our back end?
Yes.
So at the end of it, I think it's obvious. I think Jordy Ben is going to have a lot of time in the press box with his performance throughout the preseason. I still think that if Merrill or Kulikov, either one gets injured, I think he's probably the natural replacement, not Kalen Addison, just because Addison to me is not a bottom 3 type defenseman. He's a top 4 defenseman.
Now, if you see an injury, God forbid, in the top 4, you might see Kalen Addison get the call up.
I think you would see him get the call up. I don't think you're going to move anybody else into that role, because I don't think anybody else would thrive in that role. That's that's the big thing, right? So, again, Goligoski and Spurgeon, I think they're still kind of feeling each other out. But again, Brodin and Matt Dumba, I think Matt Dumba's pretty good too. Yeah, early on, I think he's really starting to settle down again, back to especially defensively.
Time to trade him, Nick.
Dude, it's been time to trade him in this fan base ever since they drafted him. My God. So, and granted, I've had Colmsman too. I've had Colms in this game, well, especially defensively when he was a little bit too offensively focused. I think he's starting to balance it a little bit more. And he's finding, the right times. And again, it's all about timing as defenseman, right? When to go up and make that offensive play, or when to simply say, you know what, I need to live to fight another day. I need to back off and play defense. And he's definitely, I think before his chest injury, was it 2 years ago, maybe 3? I thought he was actually really starting to, kind of mold into that. The injury really set him back, and I really kind of feel bad for him. But now he's starting to find that balance again, and I think he's looked really, really good. He's creating chances. He's doing great on some of those stretch passes that he has. He's got good vision, and we know that in the offensive zone he's got a good shot, and so if he can utilize that more, he's worth every penny the Wild have paid him.
Yeah, perfect middle pairing defenseman and a little bit of a power play specialist or power play slot in, so to speak. The Minnesota Wild, like you mentioned, Tuesday, October 19th against Winnipeg, and then they've got some time off. They've got Saturday against Anaheim and then next Sunday against Nashville before heading to Vancouver, Seattle, and Colorado before getting back home at the start of November. So, if I had to say one thing that kind of impressed me, and Kevin Fiala was kind of the beneficiary of this in the broadcast last night, a lot of the forwards being defensively sound. I know that's been Minnesota Wild MO for a lot of years, but having players that are, streaky goal scorers like Fiala be out in those dying moments in a 1-goal hockey game and play so well defensively, that just bodes well, because then once the offensive production starts to come, creating a bunch of essentially glorified Joel Eriksson X, great 200-foot players on both sides of the puck, I think would look good for the Minnesota Wild. They've looked good defensively. I think the forwards have throughout most pieces here. What do you got?
Well, just on that note, you can't win a Stanley Cup unless your forwards know how to play defense. I mean, you just can't. You can't be a one-dimensional figure in this league anymore. You have to be able to play both sides of the puck. And, thinking about it this way, if you're up 1 goal, it's in a playoff, say it's elimination game, and you're heading in, and let's just say you had the matchup, but all of a sudden, you're spending 45, 60 seconds loading your own zone, and, they've had their change, so they got the matchup they want. you can't control that, right? And so unless your goaltender can get a freeze, you have to be able to trust whoever you have out there as a coaching staff to be able to, keep the structure there, to be able to defend well. So I think it's great, the fact that, Dean Evason not only is building these players to be two-way forwards, but also being able to say, hey, early in the season, I'm going to, I don't know if you want to say it's a test, but he's going to say, I'm going to trust you to go do this, because guess what? Every game is important. Every point, especially in the Central Division, every point's going to be so well worth it, especially if we get towards the end of the year. And darn well that it's going to be much bigger dividends in the playoffs if this team can punch their ticket, which I think they will.
Actually a player that did that very well during his career with the Minnesota Wild was actually Zach Parisi, a guy who could play very well on both sides of the puck. And when he was out, he was often potentially a penalty killer, or a guy that you put out in the latter stages, knowing that he could do both things. Zach Parisi, I just want to pull up his stats. 2 games played for the Islanders, no points. He's -1 in the season. So just kind of wanted to see how he was doing in his new sweater. I haven't gotten a chance. While we're here, shall we go to Ryan Sutter? Shall we?
Sure.
Dallas Stars, 2 games played for him. 1 assist on the season. He's -2 so far. So maybe the grass isn't greener. Anyway, nonetheless, one thing I think
the jersey is though in Dallas. So
that was awesome. Anyway, that was very good. I'm impressed. I know Caleb Peabody isn't here, but I'm going to give Nick 1 point in the Caleb Peabody matchup. That was just that good. Speaking of things that the Minnesota Wild do need to kind of tighten up on a little bit. I think just having a little bit more transitional speed. This is a group that is a little bit slower, I think, and they're trying to get younger. But with the addition, Freddie Gaudreau, Brandon Duheim, kind of more of those guys that are a little bit more gritty, sandpaper, Jordan Greenway-esque type guys, Marcus Foligno-esque type guys. They're making it happen. They're making it work. But a little bit more speed, I think, would bode well for them. So
I think that's early season rust than anything, and it's more so. Again, you have some new faces, you have new line combinations.
Yep.
And oftentimes your heads up, the instincts aren't quite there yet, where you figured out that this player, when you have they're going at this speed, and you're just trying to keep the structure. I think it will get faster as the season goes along. So I'm not too worried about it. But yes, when you're in transition, you got to get north. You can't wait. But you also want to make sure too, Noah, as a forward, we both know this. You can also get ahead of the play too by getting too fast. So at the end of it, making sure you come up through the, as a group through the neutral zone to make sure you have support on the puck when you cross that offensive blue line. So, again, in NHL, everything has to be faster. They'll get there. I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, every play has to head north. Speaking of heading north, we welcome our visitors from the north as we head back to Minneapolis, St. Paul at the Xcel Energy Center in the Minnesota Wild. Like you mentioned, October 19th on Tuesday, hosting Winnipeg. That one's going to be at 7:00 Central. That's kind of the only weekday one until we get to Saturday, where Anaheim comes back to town at the Xcel Energy Center, as well as Nashville. So definitely keep tabs on your Minnesota Wild. Not a whole lot of hockey going on in the Minnesota professional and college hockey ranks this week during the weekday, of course, but that only means more time for some high school hockey, right? Checking that out and getting around to your local rink around the state of Minnesota. So Nick, do we have anything else that we wanted to add for this show?
No, not that I can think. I mean, I can't even think after this weekend. It's been such a busy one. But hey, for all of the hockey world for Minnesota, again, great series for the Huskies men's, great series for the Huskies women. While they're 2-0, they're undefeated. Knock on wood or stone or whatever the hell it is that this counter is made of, something like that. But it's some good it's hockey. Hey, it's October. This is what we've been waiting for, and I can't wait to see what the rest of the season holds for either of these squads. It's going to be fun to follow. We'll have it all right here for you in the Huskies Women Knows podcast. Yeah, it should be good. Like you had mentioned, that was actually a pretty good segue. I'm kind of sad that I actually jumped in there because it would have been a great end of the show. But nonetheless, you're like, yeah, I'm not surprised. Anyway, WCHA action, like you mentioned, Ohio State, Minnesota, filling out that 1-2 spot. Wisconsin followed by St. Thomas is actually in that 4 spot right now after their performance against St. Cloud. Duluth, Minnesota State, Bemidji, and then followed by St. Cloud. I think St. Cloud will start to climb in the standings there. Get out, support that women's hockey team. It was a great opportunity to follow up them and then followed by the men's team on Saturday. So definitely get a chance when they come back home returning. I think it's after next weekend or could be the weekend after. We'll keep you updated on that. Check out some women's hockey too. They definitely don't get some love from the attendance side. They definitely need it. So speaking of attendance, we're working on a guest, hopefully coming up this week. We'll keep you detailed on that one. Then, of course, episode number 84.
is on the docket already. Can't believe it's been 84 episodes coming up this Sunday. Just feels like we just started doing this. No, I'm just kidding. It feels like we've been doing it for a long time, doesn't it?
84 to haven't punched my computer screen yet. That's a positive.
Well, on the air, so to speak. You should see Nick off the air, especially when he hasn't had his cup of coffee or his spiked orange juice. It gets
spiked. Non-pulp is spiked apparently. So
yeah, it definitely gets dangerous. Who knows? We'll have to have Caleb Peabody on, speaking of guests, at some point, I think, in the near future. Maybe go Huskies Woo again too. We'll have to bring those guys back. But nonetheless, we'll be back here as always here soon in the day.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Parisi.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores. Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Kaprizov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real. Welcome to the NHL. A game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.